How's it going, guys? Great. So let's talk about fear for a second, because my talk's going to be about fear. Who here is afraid of spiders? I can't look at that picture. How about snakes? Yeah. I'm not that bad with snakes. Snakes I can hold and it'll be all right. How about heights? That's a big one for people. Yeah. These are fears that are pretty palpable because they're obvious, right? But what about fears that are a little bit under the radar, a little bit more hidden? Who's here afraid of failure? Right? Who's here afraid of being alone? Right? So there's a lot of fears, but do you ever notice how some of these things seem to have evolved from survival, right? Fear was a natural mechanism that kept us alive, and because it kept us alive, we're here today. You know, saber-toothed tiger doesn't maul our ancestors, therefore here we are, right? So fear has an important basis for its evolution. Our tendency to congregate in groups and be social is part of that whole thing too. But have you ever noticed how when kids first start out, they have absolutely no fear? I see 3 or 4-year-olds on the ski slopes and they're just like, woo! They have absolutely no fear whatsoever. Meanwhile, as we get older, it's like, oh no, a mogul, I'm gonna die. So what's interesting here is, where does this come from? I'm gonna address a lot of these things. Is it effective to have fear? How does fear evolve? So I actually believe fear is an appendix. You guys know what an appendix is? It's a useless vestige of something that used to be part of our large intestine that not only does it no longer serve us, but it actually can get inflamed and hurt us. I believe fear is a part of that. We live in a very safe world these days relative to when saber-toothed tigers were out stalking us. And unless you're in the middle of Montana where grizzlies are still attacking people, then for the most part, fear is kind of an irrelevant thing for us. So my name is Sam Tarantino. I started a company called Grooveshark, which was one of the first music streaming services. Today, you all use Spotify and Pandora and things like that. We were one of the first ones in 2005 and 2006 to do streaming music. We grew that company to 120 employees, 35 million users, and about 15 million a year in revenue. All to see it get sued for $17 billion, lose it, and then watch my partner pass away at 28 years old. So I've seen the rise and the fall and all the stories that go along with that, and I can tell you that fear, the entire ride, was a major part of it. And having gone through that, why fear is a complete illusion now. So let's start with my story. I have been a musician since I was 12. I started playing piano, then I learned guitar, and as I got older, I found a place of comfort in the fact that I was really good at it. So I went to UF in Florida, where I continued to be involved with music, and I went into a band, and of course, when I told my parents I wanted to be a musician, not an economist, they said, fine, let's see how you handle your bank account being turned off, which became the impetus to say, oh, I need to actually build a business. This is interesting. Now, I had no idea what entrepreneurship was. Entrepreneurship was this thing that really wasn't defined yet. It was sort of like these people that build businesses. But I knew I wanted to do something in music. So I go to this entrepreneurship club meeting, which sounds very nerdy, and it is, but I encourage you to, if you want to be doing anything in entrepreneurship, go to an entrepreneurship club meeting in college when you go there, because it's a very inspiring place with people trying to do cool things. And there I met my eventual co-founder, Josh Greenberg, who was a technology guy. I was a business guy. I looked at things from the music side and from the business side, and we became really complementary. He said, you know what, let's do it. He was very analytical. He knew how to do product development, and I knew how to do the entire business side because I was an economics major. Now, I wanted to kill him at times because there were times throughout our entire 10 years of doing Grooveshark where I said, why did you make that decision? Oh my God, I'm gonna kill you. But I knew that there was an underlying trust there that he would do what's best for the company and I would do what's best for the company. So that partnership was really strong. So with my early college savings, we basically got our first office. This was about a 100 square foot little, that's actually garbage that we're working on. It was the whiteboard box that we kind of put on top of another box, and that became our kind of early conference table. And then Josh actually yelled at me when I got an actual desk. He's like, you spent $50 of our startup capital on a desk? Yes. And that is actually a CRT monitor that we were using. That's not just a prop. This was 2006, so early days, and we were just getting it started. Now, the first version of the product was terrible. This is so embarrassing. I dug this up. And just the fact that it's pink and blue and when Web 2.0 was like what people called it. The first version was terrible. The second version was terrible. The third version was terrible. And what we found was that people want to actually just perform an action. And something that really disrupted everything was that in 2007, the iPhone was released. Well, this is the first time, by the way, let me set the stage here. This is 2006. There was no iPhone. Most of you probably grew up with iPhones, but imagine a time when you didn't have a portal to all humanity's knowledge at your fingertips. That was a day that there was no streaming, right? You actually had to load up songs onto an iPod from iTunes, which used to be a terrible piece of software. And that was a 6-step process to get songs on the go. When I was in high school, it was actually the CDs that you had to burn and rip, and I'm not even going to go there. I'm feeling old. So when the iPhone came out, it was a big deal because we said, you know what? In a couple steps, you're going to be able to just play a song directly to your hand, basically, which is insane. And that was the version of Grooveshark that actually started to really explode. Another thing at this time, MySpace was the largest site on the internet. So put that into perspective. Probably, like, you guys probably, what's MySpace, right? Yeah. MySpace was like early Facebook before Facebook came along. So they were doing a little bit of streaming music, but it wasn't really popularized yet. So this version, you literally just searched, and then you'd play a song. So in 2 clicks, you were playing a song right away. And we had that on the first versions of the iPhone as well. Now that was revolutionary because that had never been done before. And it hadn't been done without any sort of plugins or signups or anything. You literally just went to the site, searched a song, played a song. And that is what started blowing us up. We started growing by about 200,000 users a month. And that kind of growth was pretty wild. Like, this is us versus Spotify. When you're growing that fast, you're starting to spend money more fast too, because obviously you're using servers and stuff. And at the time, we were ecstatic. We said, oh man, like, we need new office space. We need to like hire people to like maintain all this growth and serve people. Then we have like actually have to grow revenue and stuff. So at the time, we actually had to install servers. And so we spent a lot of 2, 3 a.m. nights at the server room at the data center actually trying to install this. Now these days, if any of you are going to build a service, you just go on this nice little thing called Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, and you hit a button, and it now creates a server. So it does all of this in about 15 seconds, which shows you how much technology has progressed and how much easier it is to build things as time goes on. So one day, I get a random call. We're sitting here like struggling. Oh no, we're running out of cash like next month. What am I going to do? Like, we have 5, 10 employees. Like, this is crazy. Well, I get a call one day from this guy at Intel. I think at the time we were about 100,000 employees. I get this guy, he says, my son uses your site every day. And meanwhile, I'm like, Intel is in the company, Intel? Is that who this is? And again, I'm 23 years old. Just like, I just got a call from a Fortune 500 company. They want to invest. And I told my co-founder, Josh, I said, I think we should fly out there. This sounds important. And so we flew out there, and they invested the first Series A, or the first seed round, which is a couple 100,000. And our team grew from this initial team to this team to, over the next couple years, this team. And there was about 120 people at the peak. And throughout that time, we're growing up to about 35 million users at the peak. And actually, we were very, very big, in particular in Latin America, because Latin America didn't have Pandora, we didn't have anything. And they used to call us El Groove there, which was really cool. We had like a nickname. So we would go down to the various markets, and I would start building with my team the various revenue components, and Josh would continue working and iterating on the product. So that was the story of the rise. And the thing about this interesting is that at every milestone, we kept popping champagne because it was wild, right? We're growing so fast that it was like, oh my God, 1 million users, whoa, champagne. 5 million users, yeah, champagne. 10 million users, more champagne. Actually, our landlord yelled at us because the roof part of it was all sticky from our champagne like celebrations. So we were living a dream. I don't know if you guys have seen the Facebook movie, but that whole like excitement about growth and stuff, it was real. Like it was everything that I could have ever imagined that the startup world would actually be, and better. And every time we'd run the street, you go, oh my God, I use Grooveshark. That to me was the biggest reward, because to know that something that came out of our heads and we built, that people actually used on a daily basis and affected all these lives, was just mind-blowing. To this day, I don't even, 35 million users doesn't even register. It's like there's just some people that used it. And we were on the Forbes 30 under 30 3 years in a row, and we were like the spotlight. And it was strange because here I was, this college kid that now had created a real product and a real business. Even during the crash, as hard as it was to raise funding, and I have a whole bunch of stories on raising funding, even during the 2008 crash, a lot of our competitors were going into business, so they were coming to us. So we grew actually faster after the 2008 crisis. The challenge on that front was actually raising money to outpace that amount of growth that was happening. So we got through all the crisis problems, which again, I could spend an hour on that alone. But breaking even, if you're doing a business and that's what you want to do, I can tell you break even is the greatest day of your life. It is very, very liberating that you actually built a business that is self-sustaining and running, and you're actually growing on your own now. We actually got a mascot that would go around to all the conferences and sort of parade our company around. And then we had a real issue. We had to get all 4 of the record labels in the music industry in order to become viable. And it's a bit of a catch-22. You need money to sign the labels. You need the labels to get money. And there's a lot of political, there's a lot of politics inside of the record labels. And we had 2 of the 4 record labels, but the other 2 weren't playing ball. So the other 2 sued us, and we had a $17 billion lawsuit on our hands. It's okay, we can handle this. We've gone through the 2008 crisis and some other things, and I felt like we could handle it. The press was very innovative in their portrayal of the death of Groove Shark. We had this for about 6 years. We were fighting the lawsuit, and of course, every month there was, a shark through a roof. Is it over? But then it actually happened. After a while, it finally ended, and we got about a week away from trial, and we decided to wave the white flag, because trial is a lose-lose situation. You spend all your money regardless of whether you win or you lose. So we decided to shut down and take the summer off. This was the last wall of all of our employees that signed the goodbye for Groove Shark. And at the time, Spotify had just entered the market, and they had raised about $500 million and had paid the labels a ton of money to come here in the US, which is why you use Spotify today and not Groove Shark. So we figured it's okay. This will be halftime. Sometimes, Tom Brady just lost the Super Bowl. There's next year. We figured this was our lost Super Bowl, and we would win in the next round. But that wasn't going to happen, because Josh was found dead for no cause at 28 years old, and I got a call from his girlfriend that he had passed away. This is the last voicemail he left.
Hey, I feel weird leaving this in your voicemail, but imagine the concept of a piano teacher on Oculus. Imagine learning piano through Oculus. So picture like a virtual piano teacher who understands exactly when you're going wrong and what you're doing.
So it was the last I heard of him. It was the night before he passed. And what it illuminated for me was how short life was, how you could just not exist in the flash. And at 28, I thought I was doing the unthinkable, which was giving a funeral for my best friend, my co-founder, the person who I was going to continue on to the next startup with. Now, Josh, I thought, was vegetarian, healthy. How could someone like that just die? I mean, I eat meat for that reason now, and I justify it, saying, hey, I'm a vegetarian. Isn't that not the way to go? But in all seriousness, there were no answers. There wasn't even a cause I could get around. So I went into this very dark place of what's the purpose of anything, and why did great people get taken from us? And loss became this set of waves that sort of, as time passed, the ripples dissipated. And a friend described it as the ripples continued to dissipate for a while, but they're always there, and they're always in the background of your thinking. Now, it really taught me a lot about fear, because 700 people showed up at his funeral. A kid was 28 years old, 700 people. We actually, at UF, we were in Gainesville, and at UF we had to actually get the auditorium for his funeral. And it taught me, isn't it funny how someone so young could have such a massive impact on a community, not to mention the 35 million users that we had. I was getting thousands of tweets saying, sorry for your loss. And it's interesting because the whole time leading into Groove Shark and on the way up, I was afraid of failure, terrified of failure. What if this doesn't work? I dropped out of school at sophomore year because Intel came in on its investors. The fact that I dropped out of school was because, what if I fail Intel? What if all this happens? And the thing about what ifs is they're not real. Just like this mirage looks as real as water, right? But if you get closer to it, it goes away. And that's a real lesson on fear. The closer you get to it, the closer you get to the things that you're afraid of, the more they actually start to disappear. And the whole process of Josh really taught me that everything I had feared, not only did things happen so much worse than what I feared, but I survived it. I got through it. I'm standing here in front of you today. Who knows this photograph? This is the most famous photograph of all time, right? It's when the Wright Flyer first took off. But what people don't see are these photos, the crashes, the ones where they flipped. Or in early parts of the development of the Wright Flyer, they actually had to, the Wright brothers had to get buy-in in order to get a military contract from this guy, Thomas Selfridge. Well, they took him on a test flight to see if he wanted to buy a bunch of Wright Flyers. They crashed, Orville and him crashed, and he got killed. Not a great way to get a military contract. So you kill the guy who was the buyer of the planes. So after that, Orville rarely flew, but they got back up. They worked hard to get it, fix the bugs, fix the issues, and get back on the horse. So I offer a couple tips on recovery because inevitably this stuff happens to all of us. Bad things will happen at some point in our lives. And the question is, how do we deal with them? Because it's the only choice we have. And I realized that fear, as irrelevant as fear has become, and as unreal as it is, the way to get through it is actually to have courage. And courage, I believe, is a set of choices. And those choices, I think, are as follows. Trusting and having faith. If you're religious, it's faith. Sometimes it's in the universe. It's in various worlds, it's a different name. But trusting that there's some sort of balance. I always believe, like from physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so with bad things come good things, and there's a balance in the universe. Learning and teaching. After Josh died, I had to immerse myself in technology. I didn't know how to code. I didn't know any of that. But in learning the process of the things that he's done over the years, it actually brought me hope, and I could feel his spirit in me of like, wow, this is what he did. I can actually feel it, and I'm now part of that whole world. And teaching others is another thing, because as you see people light up and excitement, they can do what you do, it actually gets you out of that sadness. Friends and family. I had friends and family go through me this entire process, and I couldn't have done it without them. And facing discomfort. I used to be terrified of public speaking, like terrified. And facing discomfort is something that actually strengthens you. I heard a quote that the way a diamond is made is through pressure. And facing discomfort, you can't get any more pressure than things that you absolutely viscerally have a discomfort on. And lastly, preparation. Preparation is an interesting one because I'm a huge nature lover. I do a lot of mountaineering. And the thing about nature and outdoors is preparation is a key part of survival. When you're out in the outdoors and in nature, without preparation, you could be in some serious life-threatening situations. Fear, on the other hand, is what makes you more likely to hurt yourself in the outdoors. So there's a good analogy there. Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss and the universe will open where there were only walls. Easier said than done, right? There's all this fear that we have, like, what if this doesn't work? What if I get out of this relationship and there's no one for me? What if, there's all these what ifs that we have. But the hard part is to have the courage to go through those and say, I'm going to ignore this fear and I'm going to go right towards it. So that leads me to today. A year and a half ago, moved to this place where I used to vacation called Colorado all the time. And I said, I can make a choice right now to be happy, to stop being sad, to get off my butt, and actually start taking action to change the way I think. Action is an incredible thing because it's the only thing you have control over is what you do. Things happen all around. Again, back to the nature analogy. Storms hit, like things that are fires hit. So there's all these things that are out of your control, but all you have control over is action. So I moved to Colorado and began this new company called Chromatic, which was an offshoot of one of the features of Groove Shark. And it's this thing where people make their own radio shows. And to me, this was not just about creating a new company, but it's about finishing what I started with Groove Shark, finishing what I started with Josh, and actually taking it to the next half that we did. So I want to talk about traps, right? Because inevitably, you'll all deal with this at some point, and I think it's helpful to look at the things that can trip you up. Now I thought, I have all this experience. Second company is going to be so much easier. Experience yields ease, right? It turns out it's exactly the opposite. One of the hardest things to deal with is a victim mentality. Why did this happen to me? It's natural to think when something bad happens, like Josh dying or whatever, why did this happen to me? That's everyone's first reaction. And the reality is, bad things happen to everyone. And so there's no specific personalization to you. And getting into a mentality of I'm a victim actually leads you down a path that keeps you a victim. But to say I'm not a victim, I'm going to get through this, gets you past it. Another trap I found was entitlement. I'm 31 now. I started Groove Shark at 19. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I was like, I was basically almost your guys' age. I had no idea what I was doing, so I had no reference, no frame of reference as to what could go wrong. Well, when you're older and things go wrong, you now suddenly get stuck sometimes on, well, I paid my dues, or I deserve this already because I already went through all this bad stuff. And the reality is, like, the universe and the world doesn't really care. Like, it's going to be hard regardless. Lastly, thirdly, past and future thinking. There's a tendency I've had, at least, to think, oh, well, it was like this at Groove Shark, therefore it should be like this. But the world's changed. The world continues to change. And it's hard to get stuck into like how something was and to stay into that world versus how things should be. So presence, I found, is something that's really, really important. You have to stay present and in the current moment because everything changes so fast these days. External control and expectation. It's easy to say, well, it's all out of my control. Josh died. People die. Groove Shark dies. But at the end of the day, again, you can take action. And the hardest thing to do that I found is to have non-attachment to the outcomes of things, but still work 110% knowing that it may not work out the way you want it to. That's hard, but that's what creates anything, right? The best athletes in the world don't expect to get gold medals. They go out there wanting gold medals and working towards gold medals. And then the non-attachment to the outcome. It could be 4 years, it could be 8 years, it could be 12 years until they get that gold medal. But they work as hard as they can to do it. And lastly, this grows, I've noticed, as you get older here, is fear of uncertainty. Again, when you're first starting out, who knows? Maybe it'll just see what happens. As bad things happen to you, you start to get into a mode of, I never want that to happen again. And that's poisonous because that becomes the reality that you will. It amazes me how much what you think becomes the reality. Again, I've seen the side of growth and excitement, and I've seen the side of death and ending. And having been on both sides and seeing the whole thing, the entire consistency of the whole process was what I thought became reality. And that is mind-blowing. That goes to show you how powerful you are in the process of creating anything and getting through anything. So I'll leave you with this, because I believe there is a capacity for greatness in every single one of you. This is probably many of you about to go to college and go into the world. And the reality is, every single person here has fears, doubts, uncertainties, but every single one of you has courage inside of you that can get through it. I'll leave you with this quote. I do not think I'm specially fitted for success in any commercial pursuit, even if I had the proper personal and business influences to assist me. I might make a living, but I doubt I would do ever more than this. This is Wilbur Wright, the inventor of the airplane. Like, the fact that even someone like this, and history is littered with examples like this. People that thought, there's no way this is going to happen. The founding fathers, who we looked at as these mythical creatures and gods, they knew that they were going to get hanged if they lost the American Revolution. So everyone has fears. And it's a matter of the courage that you have to make the choices, to take action, to get over those fears. Because remember, fear is an evolutionary vestige. And we live in a fairly safe environment where fear is no longer needed. So go out there, conquer those fears, push yourself to have courage, because history is eagerly awaiting you. Thanks, guys.